Welcome to After the Buzzer Sports Podcast, the podcast with three distinct personalities that's going to lay it out just like it is. With your hosts today, Raquel M.R. Thomas, Lee Jones, and Marvin Orange. It is After the Buzzers.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. What's going on?
Guys, we have America that's suffering right now. Black America is literally under attack. We can see that in the riots that are going on around the country. So our show will be around what's going on in our country and how sports play a part in that. We're going to start with the rundown, and I'm Raquel Richardson Thomas, your host. Thank you so much for the introduction, Lamondre. We're going to start with after the deaths of George Floyd and Ahmaud. How do we view Kaepernick's stance on kneeling? And I think it's fair to say this is why he kneels. This is why he kneeled. This is why he sacrificed his entire career. The NFL response to Kaepernick, now what? You know, we have black men being killed in broad daylight by the knees of white officers. Also, looking at today's sports league, do you find that systematic racism still exists? Does systematic racism still exist in sports? With only one owner in the three major American sports, the NFL, Major League Baseball, as well as the NBA, being African American. Again, one being African American, and that's Michael Jordan, and the owner of the Charlotte Hornets. Damian Lillard and doesn't not wanting to play, not wanting to participate. I think we're going to have some fun with that topic. If the NBA season resumes, he's stating, essentially he's not going to play if they are not going to have a run at the playoffs. We really want your thoughts on that. 20 years after the selection of the Dream Team, Isaiah is still upset. Isaiah is still upset. So we're going to get into some conversations
Come on, Zeke.
about Isaiah being upset. And also your opinion on Michael Jordan and Isaiah Thomas. The Dream Team debate has been going on for years and years now. And Michael saying he will play on a team with Isaiah. Frankly, I think the continuity of the team would have been challenged, but we're going to get into that later in the show. With The Last Dance spotlighting the duo of Jordan and Pippen, we wanted to pose a question. Who are the best NBA duos of all time in your top five? Your top five best duos of all time. Major League Baseball Players Union delivered a firm statement that players will not back down to owners and commissioners. So we're going to get into some detail about that as well later in the show. And then we're going to wrap up with college football. College football is planning to resume in the fall. Should college football players finally unionize to protect the interests of themselves? And we want your thoughts on that. But we're going to get started, and we're going to launch with the deaths of George Floyd and Ahmaud. How do you think Kaepernick's stance on kneeling now plays a role in what's going on in the NFL? And I'm going to start with you, Marv. What are your thoughts on, Kaepernick losing his entire career for the very reasons that we're seeing right now with George, Ahmaud, and all the others that have been killed by white cops?
Well, I mean, I think we always knew from the black community why Colin did what he did. Um, he felt like it was important for him to make a statement as to, young black males are out in the streets getting killed, and I think he had a platform in which he could do that from. I mean, it's a bold statement to do the things that he did, knowing that there were going to be repercussions because, as we spoke about before,
Right.
the NFL is a old rich white guys league in terms of ownership,
That's
and
right.
it's not going to play over well. But I think there's a responsibility that we need to start having real conversations. I heard something the other day where the protests and all the things that we're doing, but we need people that are not of color to start hearing what we're saying. We got to start having difficult conversations.
Right.
I think the problem is that we don't do that. Again, not from a community of color, but from everyone else. We got to start having the conversations that are difficult. I do like what Joe Burrow, the number one pick. I don't know if you guys saw what he said in his tweet. It was very simple, but it was like we need to start listening. Instead of talking, people need to start listening to and trying to find ways to help communities of color to prosper and to just hear just the pain and agony. Um, and just talking to some of the people that I know from the SEC, this is why people love to play with him because, without saying too much, he said a lot. And coming from a white guy in the NFL who's going to play with predominantly black players, I think a lot of guys can respect that. So we all knew what Colin was doing. We all knew what this was about. They tried to change it into other things. But, what was also interesting was the NFL. I don't know if you guys saw this, on their page, and they've changed it, but they had Colin Kaepernick as retired on their page, which was interesting because he never was retired. So it just gives you an idea of just how hard he was blackballed from the NFL and all the things they did undercover to try to keep him from being in the NFL. But I think it just magnifies, kind of what he did, his stance, the things that he stood for. It's being magnified today, and we can't lose focus on trying to run with his message and kind of help the community and do the things we need to do.
Yeah. Lee, your thoughts on George, Ahmad, Kaepernick, or any other player that's been vocal about what's going on in Black America and the threat that we're under?
Yeah, first of all, we have to say and keep both George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery in our prayers and their family in our prayers because, that's traumatic, and all of the young Black men and women who have been targeted and killed, and this system of socialized racism that goes on in this country. We look at Colin Kaepernick and we say, he kneeled for social justice. This cop kneeled to kill. And the thing that really resonates with me is, when Kaepernick's deal was going on. Now there were some players, Eric Reed, other players around the NFL that followed Colin, but the masses, when you talk about 75% African American players, if they had fell in line with the stance that all of them knew were the right stance, meaning that this inequality and this injustice was going on, if they had fell in line, just think of the power they would have had in society. Now, with falling in line comes some people that will start to say some of the things that Dan Orlovsky said about Damon Lillard, calling them spoiled and entitled. But you have more power as a group as opposed to one. And I think that's what happened with Colin. That's why he can't get back in the NFL. And the owners have no desire to get him back in the NFL. Now, hopefully, with all of the things and that is happening now out in the streets, the owners wise up and say, well, getting Kaepernick back in the league would make us look better, because the NFL is all about perception. I mean, of all of those leagues, you look at the NFL, it's a perception league. When it hurts the bottom line as far as a perception thing, they'll change. But those owners have no desire for Colin to get back in the league. And it was evident by the workout in Atlanta when it was a sham. It was a sham. Yeah, and so when we look at Kaepernick, the unfortunate thing about the first and anything, and I think back to Curt Flood, and a lot of people may not remember Curt Flood, but Curt Flood was the guy that really in baseball set the stage for all free agency across all major sports, and how he was ostracized by his own players, by owners. It led him to become an alcoholic and all. Just tragic. But if you don't know Curt Flood, look him up. You think about
Cincinnati Reds, right?
Cincinnati Reds, absolutely, Mark. And you look at how the first is always ostracized. And so I love Kaepernick. I love what he stands for, but he had NFL players. I remember LaShawn McCoy said, well, it's not about racism, it's about his talent. When he had just led the 49ers to the Super Bowl 2 years earlier. So it's crazy. Last thing I'll say, Raquel, is about the organized system of racism in the sports industry. When you look at when you look at only one owner in the major three sports, that's ridiculous. When you have all of these African Americans littered across the sports world, And you say, how will this change? Well, it changes by having ownership that represents the masses that are playing in your leagues. I mean, if you have a 75% African Americans in the NFL, and you only have 4 coaches, you only have 2 GMs. I mean, what does that say? That says that we're the owners, you're the help, you're the workforce.
That's right.
And that's how we want it, which is similar to what we went through for 300 years, so 300 to 400 years. So, that system has to change, and has to change first by allowing ownership to get into these major sports, so that there's different people at the table when they start to talk about, racism and social justice and hiring and all of these things. Because if you don't have that voice, what's the incentive? Because let's be honest, okay, you're going to watch football. Marv, you're going to watch football. I'm going to watch football. Everybody's going to watch football. It's the most popular sport in America. But so we need the voice at the table to come up and talk about hiring and all these different social justice issues.
Yeah, I think I'll piggyback off of what you said, Lee, in reference to representation. Michael Jordan is the only owner in all 3 sports. And I think at some point we have to look at the systematic things that need to be changed across the board. There's no doubt there are no sports without Black athletes. There's no argument in that. There's no conversation. Even the sports that were considered predominantly white are no longer the best athletes in those sports, and now African Americans as well. A sensitive subject for me, guys. I've been heavy since George's life has been taken. So I'll say this: we live in an America that says it's okay to kill Black men, women, and children. So it's not just Black men, it's not just Black women, it's kids as well. I think outside of Kaepernick, when he kneeled, and you have to say, this is why he kneeled. We are faced with NBA players have stepped up. I'll say that. You see the guys, they have on their shirts, "I can't breathe." They've been vocal at award shows. I remember, I think it was LeBron, Carmelo, Chris
Paul.
And they took a stand, but that has to happen not only when someone is killed, but it has to continue to happen day to day. And I think athletes can really stir the pot by not coming back to play basketball. None of them, in a stance to say, you know what, it's one, and I'm all for the playoffs. Like I was super excited about it, but at this point, Dr. King said, at some point, silence is betrayal. At some point, silence is betrayal. And I think we've gotten to that point. So I think NBA players shouldn't come back in a stance to say, America, you have to do something different, because I know you stand to make millions and millions of dollars from me putting on this uniform. And like you said, they are the workers, whether they realize that or not. They are the workers. The owners are the masters in this case. I think we need to probably take a step back and look at this thing and say, we need to use our voice. We need to use our platform. And the best way right now is to say we're not going to play, because America needs to be forced to do something different. The America that we live in is okay to kill Black men, women, and children. People that we pay with our tax dollars, it is okay. And we've said that, this country has said that over and over again. I've lost count of how many people have been killed at this point. So I think we need more Kaepernicks. We need more guys with that platform, girls with that platform, to take a stance just as powerful as he did, and have to be willing to lose something. There's going to be great sacrifice for us to overcome what we're going through right now. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. And
Raquel, let me add something real quick. Can I add something real quick, you guys? Mm-hmm. The interesting dichotomy to this all, when you bring up NBA players and you bring up NFL players, is NBA players are always visible. They're always seen. You can see them. You know who they are. Also, there's another part to that. NBA players have guaranteed contracts.
Yep.
A whole
Yep.
different union
Yep.
than what the
Yep.
NFL does. If
Absolutely,
I'm an
Marv.
NFL player,
Absolutely.
and I see what happens to Colin Kaepernick, and
Absolutely.
my name's not Tom Brady or whoever it may be,
Yep.
you know, my livelihood and my ability to provide for my family now becomes in jeopardy. But I do agree
Correct.
with you, Raquel. Somebody's got to be willing to stand up and lose something, because until there are players who of really great stature in the NFL that stand up to do this. Kaepernick was great. Eric Reed next to him was great. But you got to get Tom Brady's, and you got to get those kind of guys to buy into this, to really make NFL owners change, because guys are talking about paychecks. They blackballed Colin. He had just taken him to the Super Bowl, and he out of the league.
Absolutely.
Like let's
Which
be
meant
real.
nothing in the big scheme to them, because at the end of the day, you know, Marv Lee, I think the golden boy in the NFL is the white quarterback. You know, it doesn't matter how good a black guy throws the ball. It doesn't matter how good a black guy runs the ball. Hell, Michael Vick is going to jail for killing dogs. And it's not right. It wasn't right. But white men put knees in necks. And it takes 3-4 days to arrest them, and he's out on bond. Black guys can't get out on bond for marijuana charges.
Yeah. And a third-degree murder charge. Let's put that on top of that too. So you already know where that's going.
Yeah. Marv, you hit it on the head though. The lack of guaranteed contracts, it makes for the modern day NFL player to question everything. That's why two things in the NFL has to happen. You have to have more people, more African American athletes involved in the union NFLPA process. When they voted for this last collective bargaining agreement, only half the players even voted, man. Only half of them voted. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is they need a black players union.
Correct.
Of only the collective black African American players, so that they can have an agenda for a lot of things, social justice, coaches hiring. They talk about exposure. That's how you get exposure. You make them hear your voice. And Marv, you hit it on the head. One person can never do it. Look, I'm gonna say this. You know, the Tom Brady's and the Drew Brees is a great guy, by the way. Drew Brees is a great guy. He stands for a lot. But those guys, look, they're not going to lead that way. It's going to have to be the black players, the Russell Wilsons, you know, the Patrick Mahomeses, you know, the Dak Prescott, the Ezekiel. Those players have to bond and create a black union, and then their voice will be heard. Because, Raquel, you made a great point. Look, if I'm 75% of the workforce, look, if the black players go, the NFL is in trouble. And so if they unionize or even have a black players council and they come up with a certain agenda for the NFL, it would help this process. Because you're right, Marv, the black basketball players, we see their faces. We know them. NFL players, there's a reason why they want them to keep their helmet on, and there's a 15-yard penalty if they take it off on the field. That's what I'll leave you with.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You know, football, and I said this in our last show, football is the iconic symbol of the country we live in. It is a great symbol and representation of the America that we live in, the NFL. If you want to look at it, we're going to go right into systematic racism, right? And we're talking about it now, in all honesty. But, you know, the NFL is systematic racism all day long. How they've been able to operate just from a business standpoint, guys. When you think about at one point and to very recent, they were a nonprofit. How is that possible? How?
Wow.
So, you know, you think about systematic racism. The NFL is no better iconic symbol of that when we talk about sport. Guys, you know, Michael Jordan is the only owner. We've mentioned that earlier. How do we get to a place where we have a bigger voice in the sports that we make happen? Because if we have all the black guys leave the NBA, there's no NBA, period. You're done. So NBA, if you have all the black guys say, you know what, I'm not playing football until we do something about what's going on in America, you don't have an NFL. So how do we get more Michael Jordans? How do we balance the playing field when we talk about systematic racism in professional sports in our country?
That's a
Anybody
good
take it?
question. Go ahead, Lee. Go ahead, Lee.
Well, I just think like we were talking about in the process, until they unionize, and Raquel, you're absolutely right. They have to say, look, we're not, and have to mean it. That's the first thing too. We're not going to put on this uniform until A, B, or C happens. So if they say that we want the coaching hires to represent at least half of the percentage of African Americans in the league, 35%, 40%, and we're not going to play, or we're going to strike, not as the NFLPA, but as the Black Football Council. We're not going to do it. You have to do this because you cannot make change with the one-offs. Colin Kaepernick is the one-off, right? Eric Reed is the one-off. Hey, they can silence you immediately because, yeah. but the problem, as I see it, is that we have athletes that really, especially in the NFL, because the economy of the economic structure in the NFL is totally different from basketball and baseball. Basketball and baseball, their contracts are guaranteed. NFL, I can cut you tomorrow, and you only get what we've paid you up until now. Those future years don't mean anything. So they have to come together as a unit. If they don't do that, it's not going to happen. Last thing I'll say, Raquel, very good point. When you look at the good old boy network in America, when you turn the page to that in the dictionary, it's the National Football League. From the way they hire people, from the way they treat their players. Let me say this, and Marv, you and I have had this conversation. You know what I'm about to say. Yeah. When you look at contract negotiations in the NFL, name me the last white person that had to hold out to get their contract. I'm talking about no white quarterbacks, no white running backs. You don't have any white receivers, a couple of them, but they wouldn't have to hold out either. They don't have to do it. But the black players, look, now you can like Dak Prescott or not, but what we all can agree, Marv, is he's outplayed his contract. The man has made the money, so he's got to go a year and a half, 2 years to get his money, right? All the time, Jadeveon Clowney, he's been hurt a little bit, but you know he's a great player. Cam Newton, I know we're going to talk about him a little later. Man can't even get a job because they want a particular type to be the face of their organization. And we talk about the quarterback position, but the quarterback position is slowly becoming, because of necessity, a black man's position now. Out of necessity. You still have your dinosaurs, but out of necessity. And so they want who they want as the face of their organizations. And that's from coaching, that's the GMs, the players. Hey, look, we need that hay move. We can get us a black player. We need that football ran over the goalpost. We can get us a black player, but we don't want them at the table when we're negotiating. That's a problem, and only by unity in the league would that be solved.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's really not much for me to add. I do want to say that, not to kind of turn this into the NBA, but one of the reasons why I respect LeBron James so much outside of his basketball game is what he's done to empower people that are around him. It'd be easy for him to give money, say, hey, let me set you up and make sure you're okay. But what he did was empowered his friends to build businesses, careers, and to have a seat at the table. And that's the way that we're going to start to make a difference. Players like LeBron, these multi, millionaire players that bring their friends in and start to attain wealth and start representing other black players, okay? And stop making this a white man's agent game that you don't really need anyway because your contracts are already structured.
That's right.
Especially when it comes to the NBA. And start bringing them in a position where they can have a seat at the table, even if it's minimal to start. We got to start somewhere. The whole Magic model. He surrounded himself with a whole bunch of businessmen in Los Angeles and putting himself in a position to be at the table to make decisions. So that's the way that I see it, because the old white man club in the NFL, they're not giving up them seats.
Yeah.
The only way you're going to get at that table is if you got money, period.
You have money.
And the
Absolutely.
only way we're going to be able to get money is players who are already in the league, who are going to empower people around them to learn the game in terms of, you know, how to market it, how to make money from it, not learn the game in terms of playing, and to have a seat at the table, because money going to talk. And we got to get players who are already in a position to put other people there to help kind of, you know, push us along, because it's hard to get at that table, man. If you don't have the money, you can forget it.
Absolutely. Forget it. Well
we've,
said, Mark.
We've also not done the best job of taking care of money as well. I'll say that. Our players have not done the best job of taking care of their money, which is why when you get to the end of your career, like Michael did, you're able to buy your seat at the table, and then you bring others with you when you buy your seat.
Right.
So I think when we look at, and to your point about LeBron, not only does he build the people around him and the people that have started with him from day one, he also is able to stand and be very vocal about the things that are going on in America too, right? He is very vocal. There is not anyone that's been killed that he has not verbally said something. He has always worn his "I Can't Breathe" t-shirt. And I think, you know, when we looked at The Last Dance, it's one of the huge distinctions between him and Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan has no stance. He has no stance. He stays completely out of the conversations about the George Floyds of the world, the Aubreys of the world. He stays out of that conversation. But at the end of the day, I think he's needed. You know, his career is over. You know, you can't take his team. We need guys like Michael Jordan to stand tall with LeBron. You know, one of the worst things for me about Michael is he never took a stance for our people. And he paid money, right? And we'll go back to that. He would give money and not be recognized, whereas that's great, but what we need now is his face. His face is more important than dollars right now, because he has an influence that I think could change the tide for what's going on in America because of his influence over sports. And I think, not that I agree 100% with the riots, but I don't disagree with the riots either. I think the NFL Black players, the Major League Baseball Black players, NBA players have to come together, like you said, Lee, unionize and say no more. We're gonna all, you know, riot together, if you will, you know, and that is being still, not playing, not being a slave for this season, because we need to help our people. You know, riot is the language of the unheard. King said that as well. We riot because you are not hearing us, you are not supporting us, you are not helping us how we help you. This country has been built on the backs of Black people, whether we talk about the money that whites make from sports, whether we talk about the infrastructure of the country, whether we talk about the fields that have been taken care of, the backs of Blacks have built this country. And now we have to riot in the way that we know how to defend and take care of our people.
I want to say one last thing about systematic racism, and Marva, I want you to chime in with me on this. Our kids, when they grow up playing sports, and Marv, you were Mr. Basketball in the state of South Carolina, and the recognition that comes with that. You know what I mean? The recognition. What we have to do now is educate the young at an early age on this entire system. See, because with the G League path now, Marv, where a kid can skip college altogether, and especially those that we know are going to go to the league after a semester in college, right? And understand the economics of professional sports. We have to teach them at an early age, because what happens is we have white coaches in football, basketball, telling them what they need to do, telling their parents what they need to do, tell them this is the path that you should take. I'm so impressed, Marv, I want you to check with these guys, RJ Hampton, all these other guys that are saying, no, I'm going to take the new G League route. I'm going to make $500,000 for this first year, help my family, understand that there's a different path, and I don't have to go to Kansas State or Duke or Kentucky, and I can take this path. And but the main thing is get taught the economic structure of NBA basketball, NBA life, and what you said earlier, Marv, the corporate structure of how you rise, make money, and you get to the table, as opposed to just being an athlete with yachts and gold chains and cars that depreciate as soon as you get it.
And Marv, guys, we have someone that's on our live feed.
Comment on that than any of us, Marv.
We have someone on our live feed that asked a question. And she says, and she's on Facebook Live, so thank you, Courtney, for chiming in. She says, why can't we create our own table? We got money. We don't have their kind of money, Courtney. We have play money. The type of money that you're talking about to own a team, you're in the billions. Yeah. You know, when you look at a great contract in professional sports is making $29 million a season is a great season. We got to get to the billions to start to say we're going to buy out teams. So while we have money, it would collectively take 10 players to really come together to buy a team, to have the financial capital that they need to do so. So from a business standpoint, Courtney, we don't have the money to really buy teams, because if we did, you would see more of it happening. Michael Jordan is a very savvy businessman, and the dollars that he has acquired over his entire career, he has made more money in endorsements than he could have ever made shooting that ball. Absolutely. So you think about the players that don't get endorsements, they do not have the capital, Courtney, to really become owners. That's why they're workers. That's why we have so many horses in the race, but we don't have the money to really do it. And now she's saying, if we get together, the Jay-Z, the Beyonce, the Magic Johnsons, Diddy's, of course, you're right. They have the financial power, but they can't just get in. You have to be invited to the table. So they do have the money collectively, yes, but they have to be invited to the table, because remember, it's not our table that is built. It's their table that we're trying to get a piece of.
And remember this, Courtney. The Dallas Cowboys is the richest franchise in sports. It's worth $5.5 billion. That's $5.5 billion. $5.5 billion. And the top NFL franchises. You're not going to buy an NFL franchise if you don't have $2 billion, right? No. And even though the P. Diddy's and the Jay-Z's, their net worth is $1 billion. They're not going to put $1 billion of their money on an NFL team. It's about assets and liquidation and getting that money. So, and let me say this: it can be done, because Oprah Winfrey and P.
Yeah, that's the thing you need to throw out there, Courtney. Oprah, you need Oprah at the table.
They can get anything they want, but remember this: when they open up these teams, the next NFL team that comes open, you're gonna have $5 to $6 billion to buy that team. Yeah. And so
you're talking about
Oprah and P. Diddy and all those guys want to pull together to do that? I hope they do, because it's needed really bad.
Yeah.
Mark,
there's a lot of business things that you have to think about when you think about you can't just go in and buy the team. And if you have $1 million, if your net worth is worth $1 billion, you're not going to